Hi, my name is Sophia Brockman. I'm the Student Services Specialist with our Office of Care and Civility, and I work with our Be Well team on programming. So this Be Well week, we are focusing on stress management strategies and really honing in on those resiliency skills. So I am joined here today with
Cassie Jo Ardrey.
She is our wonderful director of the career services here at HSC. We're going to dive a little bit into professional boundaries and how do we uphold them, what do they mean, and how do we respond to them? So if you want to go ahead and define what a professional boundary is.
Gosh, I feel like it's like this huge umbrella of so many different things, right? It's not one thing or other. I think for me, as I have navigated my own career journey and learning about boundaries, I feel like one of the biggest things that I had an issue with, and I see people every single day, is being comfortable saying no.
Yes.
Right? Like nobody wants to disappoint anybody. Nobody, you always want to be helpful. But I think a lot of times we feel like relationships can be impacted if we say no to something, right? And so I think a lot of times when I have literally had no other choice but to say, hey, I'm at capacity. I just literally cannot take this on. I think it's like anything else, like a reflex, right? The more often you do it, the more comfortable you become with it. And so obviously saying no or finding a way to let somebody know that this is not something that you can do right now, I think is probably one of the biggest things that I see folks struggle with no matter what their career is. I also think when you get to the point of being able to say no, I think it's almost refreshing when you observe somebody else say no, and it kind of gives you that empowerment to do the same.
Yeah, for sure.
And so just through some experiences in my own, like I said, my own journey, I think I was hesitant to say no because I always want to collaborate. I always want to do these things. But at the end of the day, like my wellness and my well-being and research tells us that if we don't set these types of professional boundaries, that they are directly related to burnout. And that's your own participation in burnout, right? And we don't even realize it until it's happened.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you touched upon, because when we look at, for me, when I look at professional boundaries or just boundaries in general, I'm like, it's something I have to do. When I'm saying no to somebody, it's because I don't want to do that. But sometimes you're just at capacity.
Yes.
Like you said, like that collaboration sounds awesome and it really feels like it'll move things forward. But I'm like at 85% right now. And that's going to require 30% of me.
Exactly.
And so I think that was a really interesting thing to touch upon. And so do you have any, like, what do you do to check in with yourself and see where you're at capacity-wise?
Man, that's a good one. I think really and truly, I think for me, right, and I would encourage everybody, if you're not in touch with like physical signs of stress, right? There are physical signs of stress, and I think sometimes they can fly below the radar until they're just like in your face. But also like just feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you're not going to be able to get something turned in on time, feeling as though you're juggling so many different things that you don't feel like you can give each and every project or whatever the kind of time and attention that you want to. I think for me, when I think about the times that I have felt overwhelmed or felt at capacity or getting close to it, right, I feel like a lot of the times I have seen my time management falter like other areas, right? And so I think like when I think about tips and stuff, and here's the deal, like we're talking about professional boundaries, but these things apply to our personal life too. And so a perfect example, thinking about how a boundary that I can set that absolutely is probably congruent in my personal and professional life, like just realizing, like, say I've got a lot of stuff and events going on at work and I'm having to tell my family and friends and my support group, hey, I am going to be doing this after hours event. I'm not going to be able to do dinner or happy hour, whatever it is this week, right? And so I think they go both ways, right? Hey, I really can't take on this project. I've got a lot of things even outside of work right now that are needing my attention. And so I think recognizing where those two intersect, right? I think that's also a key piece to have general healthy boundaries, but to reinforce your professional boundaries is when you can really bring the two together and recognize how boundaries in general are very important for us to stay well. And that at the end of the day, I read this, or it's like a quote I heard somewhere. I was like, nobody died from being told no. You know what I mean? Like, adults can be told no, right? And like, we're perfectly capable. It's not like we're toddlers. When you get told no, you throw a temper tantrum, right? Like, adults are capable of being told no. And I like that just like really sparked something in me. And I was like, yeah, that's right. You can be told no, and it's not the end of the world. So I would say, like, overall, like, as far as navigating that, knowing yourself, right? And I think, like, when I think about, like, biofeedback, and if you're not already doing this, like, that's a huge piece of it, right? But that's also a part of knowing yourself and doing a lot of self-reflection is knowing when you're feeling a little bit more overwhelmed, anxious, you're not sleeping well. There's all of these indicators if you're willing to be intentional about doing that reflective piece that will give you an idea about, hey, you need to slow down, you need to do these things, or this is going to be disruptive and probably not in a great way, right? And so I think the biofeedback, and then honestly, I think sharing out like your pain points, your struggling points with those that support you, and whether that's your supervisor, your peers, right? Like when you say no to a project, or you're just not in a space to be able to join in or collaborate. I think also sharing that out also in a way lightens the load, right? Because somebody else may be like, me too, right? Like same, like I am definitely in a space of like, I am just at capacity. And so I think opening the lines of communication is a key point in that. But here's the deal. Nobody knows that you're overwhelmed and struggling if you don't share that out.
Yeah.
Like I can't read your mind. I don't know these things, right? And I'm a huge Brene Brown fangirl. And one of her key terms that she says, and I am constantly saying this, is clear is kind, right? Explicit is kind. And I think sometimes when we're really direct and firm in the things that we need, like letting somebody know, like that's our expectation, or hey, I can't give to this project right now. And so clear is kind. And we as adults, going back to being told no, I think is a key component of our own like emotional development, right? Is it's okay to be told no. And even as adults, sometimes it can, be like, oh, womp womp. But also like that is a part of life. And we're told no in so many areas of our lives. So why can we not share that out directly when really no is the true answer?
Yeah. One thing goes back to, how do you sit with discomfort? And a lot of people, and a lot of our students, they're highly motivated and ambitious. And saying no, even thinking the word no to them is like, I can't put this on a resume.
It's taboo.
I can't, talk to a mentor about this. And so, and I wasn't. I was an HSC student, so I understand it. And so it is one of those things where you have to get uncomfortable with it. And you just have to kind of sit there.
Sit in the discomfort, grow through it, right? And learn, again, going back to nobody's ever died from being told no.
Exactly.
Period. One of the things to your point, especially for our students here at HSC, they're such high achievers, right? A lot of our students are type A, right? Like they've always been the top of the top. They're the upper echelon. And I affirm that, right? But there are definitely some characteristics around that high achiever, and boundaries are one of them. And one of the biggest areas that I've seen students struggle in transition to literally no matter the program that they're in here at HSE is finding the boundaries. And it's really interesting because it's typically not around school because they've given so much, but it's putting boundaries around family and friends because the amount of time that they were able to contribute to those relationships has changed. And they feel guilty about having to tell their family, hey, I can't come home this weekend. I've got a huge test coming up. Or, whatever it is, I've got an event in a student org that I'm involved in and I'm just not going to be able to drive back down to Houston or whatever, right? And so a lot of the conversations that I see with students when we talk about those things is really those boundaries going through program here at HSE, but also trying to help their friends and family understand that the time that they were able to give them previously looks a lot different right now, and that it's a season, right? And I always say that to students. I was like, this isn't forever. This is a season of change. This is a season of, kind of stepping back and having all of that extra time to spend where, quote unquote, we want to. And now you really have some pretty strict boundaries around just trying to be successful in a very rigorous program here at HSE. And so if there's nothing else that anybody could potentially take from this podcast is understanding that it's okay to tell your support system, your loved ones, that I love you, I still care for you, I want to spend this time with you, but right now this is just not something I'm able to give. At the same level, right? You can still find time and ways, but I think students struggle with that and they feel guilty about it. And one of the pieces of encouragement that I have for them is, again, that this is a season. This is not forever. And the season may be long. It may be a few years, right? It may be a little bit of a long season. But at the end of the day, they've worked so hard to get where they're at and where they're hoping to go, that setting those boundaries, again, personally and professionally, are really going to be a key decision in helping them be successful in their time here with us at HSE.
Yeah, for sure. And when because we've all had it where we've laid down a clear boundary. And I always try to remind people, because this is something I've had to come to terms with in the last few years, a boundary is something you do in response to somebody else. Like, I can't sit here and be like, hey, Cassie, can you not give me more work to do tomorrow?
Yep.
But I have to be like, hey, I'm at capacity. If this can wait until next Wednesday,
absolutely,
we can do it then. And a lot of times, people are like, I'm not going to do that. Or like, you can't speak to me that way. And it's just like, hey, I'm not going to be in this conversation if that's how I'm being spoken to.
Absolutely.
And so when our boundaries do get crossed, especially in a professional field or world or whatever, when you feel like you have to put on this image and it has to be very strict and very, prim and proper in a way, how do you suggest our students handle that, like that confrontation or that altercation?
Yeah. And I think that's another, and this is probably for another podcast, but the ability to maneuver through uncomfortable conversations, right? Crucial conversations. And I think that's another key element of your professionalism toolkit, right? Is the ability to navigate those type of conversations. I would say, as far as a tool and a tip, going back to clear is kind, but also the kindness piece. You can share out your needs or your capacities in a kind way. You can also, I'm going to give an example, in fact, with you, right? So you would ask me to book some time to come to a video for Be Well Week, right? And as you know, I've been super shorthanded and I wasn't at the point to say no, Sophia, I can't do this, right? But as far as a time frame, thank goodness that you were checking in with me because at the time I was like, sure, no problem. I can get this done, have this back to you, right? But things came up and thank goodness for you checking in with me because at the end of the day, what we're doing now in the form of a podcast ended up being a lot more feasible for me in the season that I'm in right now, right? And so I think sometimes it also takes that emotional intelligence piece, and kudos to you for having that, to just be like, hey, would a podcast be easier? I'll schedule it. Yes, let me just show up because right now, thinking about scheduling that, right? All of those things. And so at the end of the day, going back to the uncomfortableness, like it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay for you to say something that makes somebody else feel uncomfortable around a boundary, right? Again, going back to it's okay to say no. But I think one of the biggest things is like if we don't share out our needs, right? If we are trying to, for lack of better words, people please, right? And whether or not we want to do it or not, we don't want to disappoint anybody. At the end of the day, if you can't recognize your own needs, you're not going to meet the needs of others that you're trying to serve, right? Period. And I think I think there's like a saying around, if you don't take care of yourself first, how are you supposed to take care of other people, right? And I think for our students who are obviously in our programs to be of service to others, like this is a crucial piece of learning how to serve yourself so that you can better serve others. And so when I think about those professional boundaries, I also just think about those crucial conversations and starting to become comfortable having hard conversations. And whether that's saying no or that is acknowledging maybe an unprofessional behavior in somebody and then, pulling that person aside and saying, hey, this really, this made me feel uncomfortable and let me tell you why, right? And I think that it's learning to allow yourself to step into those spaces. And when you do, I think you will find, if you're willing to do that lots of times you have assumptions in your mind or you've told yourself a story as to why and how these things happened. But if you just have that conversation, those stories go away and you actually can talk with that person. Now, obviously, that's dependent on if that person is receptive, right? We can't always absolutely cannot control how other people respond to us. But I think when I think about like tips and things like that is really coming back to like very foundational things. And it's upholding your values, right? And I think boundaries are directly correlated to your values. I think you can set healthy boundaries and also say, hey, this is not within my value system. I'm not okay with this, right? All of these things, but also the ability to learn how to share that out. I think that like, and that goes back to like learning how to be an effective communicator, right? Yes. We talk all the time about career readiness skills. And effective communication is in the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, right? And it doesn't matter the modality in which you're communicating, whether that's nonverbal, that's verbally. So at the end of the day, I think when students are faced with, uncomfortable situations, whether that's with faculty, their peers on a group project, a preceptor out in the field, right? All of these things come back to your ability to be emotionally present for yourself and for others. And honestly, like I think for me that has been probably one of the foundational skill sets that has allowed all the other areas for me in professionalism to really develop is to really come back down to like an emotional human being is in front of me and I am trying to be thoughtful, caring, right? Considerate, empathetic, all of these things, but also finding if any of those things are really in a space of detriment to me, like when and how I have to step in. And so I think it sounds selfish, but it's really not selfish. Like boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries help you and it helps others engage and interact with you. And so if there's literally nothing else that anybody might take from our time together today, like setting boundaries are in fact a better way to help other people engage and interact with you, period, personally or professionally.
Yeah, for sure. When it goes back, filling up your own cup before you kind of dump it out into somebody else's bowl.
Yep.
And so I think, like a lot of times we're like, boundaries make us uncomfortable. They make other people uncomfortable. How is it not a selfish task?
Yes.
But it, like you said, it's self-care.
It's self-care.
It's telling yourself, hey, like I matter. My comfort matters. My time management matters. And I think a lot of our students are kind of starting to learn that like this is, they're of the age where you're actually you're interacting as an adult.
Absolutely.
You unfortunately are an adult.
Yes, right?
The frontal lobe is there.
It's there. It is formed, right? And not only that, that's so funny you say that because I read a meme this morning and this is just completely in alignment, but it was like, adulthood is the scariest hood I've ever been in.
And it is. And it's so, and just growth in general is so uncomfortable. And so having to learn over and over again, especially as, boundaries, self-care, mindfulness, as those start to become more mainstream topics, it's incredibly important to do it effectively.
Right.
But also figure out the way that's best for you. Because my boundaries, they're not going to be the same as yours.
Absolutely not.
And the interpersonal person, whatever, they're just not going to be the same because we have different capacity holds. We have different resiliency, different emotional intelligence levels or skills or whatever. And so I think a lot of our students, think it's a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, definitely is not.
It's not a Band-Aid. It's not a little, suture or whatever metaphor you want to use.
Right. Yeah.
You got to kind of, even if it's just researching, Googling, or even going to, Chat GPT and being like, can you come up with some boundaries for me?
Right.
And then just trying them. There's no harm in just trying to lay a boundary. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right.
And so, but I think, going back to your point of, you also have to be receptive of other people.
100%.
And you have, there's going to be points where both parties are super uncomfortable.
Yep.
Might be a little miffed at each other.
Oh, 100%.
But you just kind of, you got to let it be.
Yes.
You
have to sit in the suck, right? You've got to sit in it and be like, okay, this is uncomfortable. This is not ideal. But also, what can I learn from this?
Yes.
What can I learn about myself? What can I learn about others, right? That is going to make me literally a better human being. Doesn't even have anything to do with a career or, right? What is going to make me a more well-connected, non-self-serving human being? And I think a lot of that is, I think that while I would call myself a very individualistic person, I also value collectivism, right? And so I think that when I think about the wholeness of humanity, right? What is my tiny little part? Well, I think my tiny little part is to really be intentional about my engagements, my interactions, the words that I use, right? The boundaries that I set. All of that is a participation in that. And not only that, I mentioned this earlier, but I witnessed this for myself, is when we watch other people do these things, it empowers us. It encourages us. It lets us know that not only is it okay, but somebody else is doing it, and they're doing it consistently, and it's not as scary as I feel like it's going to be when I have to do that, right? And so watching other people say no has been one of the greatest gifts, especially when, you're in a supervisory role and things like that. There's going to be times where somebody wants to take a vacation, but guess what? It's going to be a really high programming time, and you're going to have to be like, man, it's really not a great time, right? Is there any other time that you can do that? And I think when I think about, especially those of us that are in leadership roles, that is our job, is to have those boundaries. Literally, that is what we are tasked with in our role, is to say yes, no, maybe so, right? Yeah. And so learning through that just from a decision-making standpoint, right? There are things that I would love to do, but I don't have the capacity. I don't have the person power. There's so many things that I have to take into consideration. And I think that's the same thing for ourselves. So there's a lot of things that we need to be taking into consideration about what is going on in our world and how do we identify where our energy is put. And that is going to ebb and flow. It will never look the same, right? It's going to ebb and flow. It's going to be seasonal as well. But your ability, and going back to your point in resiliency and your ability to navigate those spaces and places during your life, I think is what is going to make you a well-rounded human being. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's a great place to end.
Yeah.
End on a high note. But is there any last thoughts you have that you got to get out?
Well, if you haven't read any Brene Brown books, I highly encourage that. And just at the end of the day, I encourage boundaries. I encourage, and here's the other thing. I'm here as a resource. If you are having challenges figuring out what boundaries you need to set, or even how to go about that and how to share that out with somebody, this is a resource we can provide you in the Career Readiness Center. So any students needing assistance with that, I will be more than happy to chat with you, coach you through that, because sometimes we just need that encouragement and support to get the okay and feel empowered to share that out. So don't sleep on the resources in the CRC.
Yes, definitely. I'll have your webpage linked below. Also linked, they have a really great LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah.
If you've never visited or scrolled through it. And we've done a few how to prepare yourself for the professional world videos and presentations that are on our YouTube. So I'm going to link all things CRC below in our description. And you can just peruse it at your own time and on your own terms. But yeah, I want to thank Ms. Cassie Jo for joining me.
Absolutely.
Talking about boundaries, one of our favorite things.
One of our favorite things.
But we hope you guys have a great day. Feel free to click the links in the description, find some more things, or just schedule an appointment with Cassie if you just want to chat with her about anything.
Yes, yes.